everyone, welcome to the second exclusive episode of Jann Ki Debate at Jann Ki Baat with Pradeep Bhandari and myself, Akriti Bhatia, doing the female selfie series. The topic of today's debate is imposition of President's rule in Arunachal Pradesh was justified. As we all know, this is a very serious and controversial issue which is still going on with involvement of Supreme Court, party politics and many others. We take perspectives and opinions of the Jann on this issue, and are joined by four seasoned professionals as speakers. The first speaker will be Mohit Singh, speaking for the motion, and he is a Supreme Court lawyer. The second speaker speaking against the motion is Madhusudan, who is joining us from Oxford University and is doing his MBA. The third speaker will be Shah Fahad, who is LLM from University of Jammu. He will be arguing in favor of the motion. And finally, we will be joined by Anmol Dutt Mehta from London School of Economics. He's doing his master's in business law and will be talking against the motion. I hope you enjoy this exciting debate ahead. Thank you so much.
Hi everybody, this is Mohit Singh. I'm an advocate at the Supreme Court of India, and I would be speaking in favor of the motion, that is, the imposition of President's rule in the state of Arunachal Pradesh is justified and is in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution of India. President's rule is imposed in a state as per Article 356 of the Constitution of India in case of failure of the constitution machinery in the state. The requirement under Article 356 is that the President has to be satisfied on the report of the Governor that a situation has arisen in the state, that the government of the state cannot function and carry out its activities in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution of India. We know that the President's rule was imposed on January 26th and the report of the Governor was received on January 24th. The contents of the letter are not in public domain. However, media reports indicate that some features of the report are that there was a law and order situation in the state, and that there was a constitutional crisis in view of Article 174 of the Constitution of India. Due to paucity of time, I will restrict myself to the constitutional crisis under Article 174(1) of the Constitution of India, because in my opinion, if the requirement under Article 174 is not met, then that is a sufficient situation and a sufficient ground for the President of India to invoke Article 356 of the Constitution. Article 174(1) of the Constitution of India inter alia provides that there shall not be a gap of more than 6 months between two consecutive assembly sessions in the state. The previous assembly session in the state of Arunachal Pradesh had taken place in the month of July 2015, when the monsoon session had taken place. Thereafter, there was a lot of political drama in the state, wherein the majority of the Congress MLAs had formed a separate faction, had chosen a separate leader as the chief minister, and had chosen the deputy speaker as the speaker. Thereafter, a session had taken place in December. However, the Congress claims that the session was invalid. Accepting their position, it is an undisputed factual position that there has been no assembly session after the month of July, and thus more than 6 months have elapsed after the last assembly session. Therefore, there is a constitutional crisis in view of Article 174 of the Constitution of India. Therefore, irrespective of the fact that whether the defection or the disqualification was valid, whether there was a law and order situation in the state, or whether the Congress government is in majority, there is no answer to the question that how does the present situation satisfy the requirement under Article 174. The Supreme Court of India has held in several cases that the provisions of Article 174 is mandatory in character as far as live assembly is concerned. Therefore, I submit that the imposition of President's rule in the state of Arunachal Pradesh is completely justified. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Madhu, and today I'll be speaking against the proposition of the motion. As a brief introduction, I'm a student of MBA at the University of Oxford, so I'm no constitutional expert, and therefore will be completely relying on commonsensical perspectives and pure facts in formulating this opinion. So to begin with, So I started exploring what the entire concept of this emergency is. And as we all know, during the high schools we have studied, there are three kinds of emergencies that can be imposed in our nation. One is the national emergency, the other is the state emergency, and the third is the financial emergency. Thankfully, we have never had to impose a financial emergency. We have had a very bad experience with the national emergency, and there have been more than 3 or 4 dozen instances of state emergencies. These state emergencies are what is known as the President's Rule. So a simple Google or wiki into President's Rule says the phrase President's Rule refers to the imposition of Article 356 of the Constitution of India on a state whose constitutional machinery has failed. Be very attentive to this, whose constitutional machinery has failed, right? In the event that the state government is not able to function as per the Constitution, the state comes under the direct control of the central government. So this triggered a curiosity in me. All right, the central government, under the name of the president, imposes a central rule on the state. So is the central government legitimate in doing so? I was just trying to do the numbers in the interest of the democracy, and it turns out that in Arunachal Pradesh's case, out of all the members in the parliament, both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha put together, Arunachal Pradesh is just represented by 3 among 700 odd MPs, and in the electoral college that elects the president, the share of Arunachal Pradesh in the total electoral college is 0.08%. So is the center and the president legitimate in imposing a rule on a state like Arunachal Pradesh? Definitely not. At least it doesn't subscribe to the definition of democracy here. Correct? And the second point is the situation under which the entire emergency was imposed on Arunachal Pradesh. So I told you, please pay attention to the word constitutional breakdown. So was there a constitutional breakdown? So when I started reading all these articles on leading newspapers, it appeared that it was more like a political breakdown than a constitutional breakdown. So there was a scheduled session to be held on January 14th or someday in January, mid-January. But then these rebel MLAs felt so insecure that they wanted to preempt the session and instead hold a session in a community hall. And that's what they did, right? And they defeated a motion. They moved a no confidence motion, won it, and therefore that led to the imposition of the President's Rule. So where is constitutional breakdown again here? What is that? Please explain it to me, someone. And if holding sessions and not performing in the sessions is a criteria to be called as constitutional breakdown, right? Then be it the Congress government or the BJP government now, I think we have a constitutional breakdown in the union, right? Because there have been so many sessions that have been washed out. They've been meeting for sure. They've been holding sessions for sure. Are there any outcomes of those sessions? No. So I read an article saying that the monsoon session was completely washed out, right? So there was no outcome. So they didn't meet for more than 6 months, if that is a criterion at all. So the selective interpretation of constitution and again the legitimacy of this entire exercise of President's Rule on a state, I believe, has completely outlived the utility, and therefore, in my opinion, the imposition of President's Rule on the state of Arunachal Pradesh at this point in time makes no sense. Thank you.
President's Rule in Arunachal Pradesh, we have to see 2 factors for its justification. One is the constitutional factor and the other is importance factor. Regarding the constitutional factor, we have for the imposition of President's Rule, we have to see the constitutionality. The constitutionality of the President's Rule says that it can be applied in any of the states when there is a breakdown of constitutional machinery, or the state government does not follow the instructions of the central government. In case of Arunachal Pradesh, there was a complete breakdown of constitutional machinery. How we can say that? The government in Arunachal Pradesh was a minority government since last couple of months, and when this matter was about to be solved, the speaker along with the chief minister locked down the assembly and prevented the MLAs from going to the assembly and solving the issue of minority government. This clearly shows the constitutional machinery in the state had completely broken down. Another factor which is very important in case, especially in case of Arunachal Pradesh, is the strategic and security importance of Arunachal Pradesh. When we come to this geographical area, Arunachal Pradesh lies between China and India, and everyone knows that there is a claim from China regarding Arunachal Pradesh. So subsequently there have been many intrusions. We have many security issues with China related to Arunachal Pradesh. So in this scenario, we cannot leave such an important state without a strong and efficient government. Constitutionally, there is no factor which we can say that the imposition of president's rule in Arunachal Pradesh was not constitutional. Another very important point regarding the constitutionality is that every chief minister in India is duty bound to report to the governor on important matters, any of the decisions taken on important matters. Yeah, and in case of Arunachal Pradesh, it has been alleged that the chief minister, along with the bureaucracy, we can say the chief secretary, was not reporting the important decisions to the governor. So this is an important duty applied on the chief minister. When the chief minister is not following such an important duty which has been laid down in the constitution, we can say that there is technically there has been a constitutional breakdown in the state. So from a strategic point of view, from the constitutionality of this action, there is no factor which says that it was unjustified or uncalled for. Giving an efficient government in such an important location is very important, and that is one thing which has been done. Unless and until we can resolve the entire minority issue of the government, we have a strong government. There is a strong opinion that President's rule in case of Arunachal Pradesh is very important, and it was a necessary action taken by the central government.
I argue against the motion, and the first limb of argument is structured around how the Supreme Court has observed the issue, starting from a limited judicial review in the state of Rajasthan to a much more expansive view in S.R. Bommai versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court categorically observed that it has the power to judicially review the action of the President of declaring the emergency, and it endorsed the Sarkari Commission. What becomes important in this case is Supreme Court stating with some clarity scenarios where it would be held to be proper to invoke the power, and scenarios where it would be improper of the President to invoke its power and declare state emergency. And in those scenarios, a simple maladministration in the state and internal rift between the ruling party does not qualify as scenarios that would justify the power of President invoking Article 356 and declaring state emergency. This becomes seminal because in last 2 years what has happened in Arunachal Pradesh is a political crisis. A crisis between the ruling party, which has an absolute majority of 2/3, and challenge to the leadership within the party. But it is in no way a constitutional crisis which would justify that there is a complete failure of constitutional machinery within the state. The state cannot function apart from the fact that the President invokes power and steps in. The second argument is with regard to the fact how governors are appointed and removed, and this becomes seminal and is important because in last few years what we've seen is that governors are appointed and removed in a political manner, and which does not enable them to play their constitutionally constructive and instructive role in scenarios of political crisis, and stop them from escalating into a constitutional crisis. The governors are appointed at the pleasure of the President, and this vague expression was explained in BP Singhal versus Union of India in 2010. And Supreme Court ruled that while the President has absolute power of removal and appointing the governor, the appointment and removal cannot be capricious, cannot be based arbitrarily, and cannot be on bad faith. It also observed that simply because the governor is at variance with the opinion of the central government, he cannot be removed. and this observation becomes important from what happens when a new government comes in power and governors are removed and new governors are put them in place. What it does is that it creates a distrust in the constitutional position of the governor, and he fails to perform his function in scenarios where there's internal crisis within a ruling party, which could otherwise be solved in a much more instructive manner, with governor calling the warring factions between the ruling party and mediating to a culmination of ideas and absolving the situation there and then, rather than the governor jumping to taking the great leap of asking the president to invoke its power, which is wholly unjustified in scenarios of simply a political crisis in a party.
Madhu has raised three main issues. Firstly, that there is a very low representation of the state of Arunachal Pradesh in the parliament, and therefore it is wrong to impose the will of the central government on the Arunachal Pradesh. However, this fact may not be completely correct because of the federal character of the Constitution of India and the nature of the Constitution of India. Secondly, it has been suggested that the non-happening of the December session has led to the failure of constitutional machinery. However, this is also not correct, because it is the alleged invalidity of the December session of the State Assembly of Arunachal Pradesh which has led to the failure of the constitutional machinery in view of Article 174(1) of the Constitution of India. And thirdly, it was suggested that the washout of Parliament, the Indian Parliament, can be compared to the non-happening of sessions in the Arunachal Pradesh Assembly, and therefore a similar situation is prevalent in the central legislature as well. However, this is not completely correct, because though a large amount of the sessions of the Parliament were washed out, yet a huge legislative work was done and several bills were passed, and therefore both the situations cannot be said to be same. Secondly, to start with Anmol's arguments, Anmol has also raised three important issues. Firstly, it has been suggested that a simple maladministration and internal rift cannot be used to impose president's rule. However, this is not completely correct, because this issue was one of the issues, and the main issues being the failure of the constitutional machinery in view of Article 174(1) of the Constitution of India. Secondly, it was also suggested that the government is in absolute majority. However, it was the earlier situation, and now the government is in minority after a separate faction was formed. And thirdly, it was suggested a huge stress was put on the point of the appointment of governor and the politics surrounding it. However, this point is completely irrelevant. Therefore, I again submit that the imposition of president's rule in the state of Arunachal Pradesh was completely justified in view of Article 174(1) of the Constitution of India. Thank you.
Hi. So I've been asked to present a rebuttal of the entire situation. I heard a lot of constitutional quoting from my friends who are standing for the proposition of the motion, and I will leave it to the expertise of Anmol. He is far better qualified than I am to counter those points. However, considering this is Jann Ki Baat, I would be more interested in understanding the common man's perspective. So I would definitely want to know, as a common person, does president's rule ensure a smooth functioning of the state government? It doesn't, in my opinion. So it is just a stopgap arrangement, and it's not a very efficient stopgap arrangement either. So let's try to understand what would have happened had the president's rule not been imposed on the state of Arunachal Pradesh. The state would have gone into election mode, and I'm pretty sure the judiciary and the legislature have checks and balances on each other and judiciary has a capability to impose electoral process, right? So we won't necessarily need a president's rule in between. And what happens during the president's rule, in my opinion, is a lot of political manipulation. We don't need a constitutional expert to understand this. We have seen this happen. We know a lot of horse trading happens. And when we have different governments in the state and the center, this is precisely what is expected, especially in a president's rule. So I'm not really interested in quoting the constitution. I would be interested in the welfare of my nation.
Views regarding the non-justification of President's rule in Arunachal Pradesh. Well, one of the arguments was that Arunachal Pradesh contributes a very minute number of members of parliament, and it has a very small electoral college in the election of president. Well, these are two different subjects and are not related in any of the sense, and it has nothing to do with imposition of president's rule in Arunachal Pradesh. So the rebuttal would be that this issue is totally not related, and another regarding the political appointment of governors. Well, it is true that governors are appointed on the political will of the party which is in the center, but we cannot say that each and every action that the governor takes is on the center's will and it is politically biased. We have seen that in case of Arunachal Pradesh there was a mockery made out of the total soul of the constitution by the legislature. Since legislature, out of the three organs of the government, legislature is one of the basic and most important organs, so there lies an extra duty on all the members, the speaker, the chief minister of the state to uphold the constitution and to run the government efficiently and in the proper sense of the constitutionality. Locking down of the assembly by the speaker, against whom the members had come out in the open, they were against the CM of the state, and there was a total chaos in the legislature of the state, and this implies that a constitutional breakdown had taken place. And an important factor that needs to be kept in mind is that Arunachal Pradesh is such a strategic location that we cannot leave it in the hands of an inefficient government or a government which is not working on the lines on which it was elected by the government.
My arguments are limited to stating that the scenario being dealt here is with regard to an errant governor, situation of political opportunism, and the issues that are before the Supreme Court, that whether the governor acted within the wise of his power while convening a session without referring to the aid and advice of Chief Minister and his council. The speakers supporting the motion have conveniently omitted certain facts, that the session was supposed to be and was determined to be called on January the 16th, while the governor stepped in and called for an early session in December without there being a proper reasoning, and thus there was absolutely no threat of a gap of more than 6 months between two sessions, as has been mandatory, required and asked by the Constitution. And also I would like to state that if there are genuine explosions with regard to the support the Chief Minister has, then he should be asked by the governor to state his numbers and show the necessary support to run the government, rather than asking the centre to step in and take the control in terms of declaring an emergency. My second issue is with regard to Speaker raising that Arunachal Pradesh being a strategic important state, the centre has to be much more careful because that just completely does not justify the state stepping in, and sets a bad precedent, in fact, because it shows that the state can act much more whimsical if a state borders another country and can simply state that there is an issue of security and would take hold of the power. The power given under 356 is to be exercised by hands tied at the back by the centre, and thus the centre has to be much more careful before it can declare that there is a state of emergency and take control of the power.
Thank you so much for hearing out our four speakers engage in stimulating discussion and debate over the issue of whether Arunachal Pradesh did undergo constitutional breakdown and whether the imposition of President's rule in the state was justified. I hope you enjoyed the debate. I also request you to please watch out the space for much more action to follow, and you could also expect a follow-up debate and discussion on this particular issue of Arunachal Pradesh once again. Thank you so much. Please follow Jann Ki Baat.